Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and today we'll be taking a look at the Zandalari as well as Kul Tirans. Both of these new allied races are coming in patch 8.1.5 on March 12th. Now, a lot of you guys are probably wondering, are these races going to be great? What are the racials and how good are the racials? I've talked on my channel about the racials before, but today I really want to talk about just how strong they are and where is their bonuses to these racials and how people can utilize them in order to give you guys as many ideas as you can, whether you want to level certain classes in Zandalari or maybe it's time for you to switch your main just because maybe Zandalari or Kul Tiran racials are just that damn strong. So let's start off with the Zandalari. The Zandalari are very exciting because of their multifaceted racials, the lower which offer so much variety to the gameplay, just as well as just fun racials. First of all, this race is very interesting because it's one of the tallest races in the game. So if you're playing Zandalari, you're going to be towering over everybody. Second, they are notable for the fact that they can be paladins. It is the first race outside of your regular, like for Janai, the dwarves, for example, the humans, the blood elves, that Zandalari can be paladins, so that makes them very notable and very interesting. There can also be a plethora of other classes like warriors, hunters, rogues, priests, shamans, mages, monks, as well as druids with their unique druid forms. The only class that they can be as a caster is warlock. It was initially told that during BlizzCon that yes, they can be warlocks, but Blizzard reverted that because in the lore there's not a lot of Zandalari warlocks. Although I keep hearing from viewers as well as guilders that yes, there is a Zandalari warlock, so I'm not really quite sure if it is true or not, whether they should be warlocks or not. I guess it's really at the end up to Blizzard to decide, but they do have a lot of variety of different classes they can be. There's plenty of variety for casters, plenty of variety of melee. They can be both healers, tanks, as well as pretty decent DPS in BFA. The racials are also very fun, but also very useful in more ways than one. First of all, when we take a look at the Zandalari, you take a look at some of the racials. One of the coolest racials ever is Pterodact Swoop. What this ability does is reduces your falling speed for 2 minutes. This works exactly like a Goblin Glider. So when you're playing your Zandalari, you basically are playing with a racial that works just like a Goblin Glider. I think this is exceptionally useful, and if you do decide to change your character, even your mains, to a Zandalari, you will be able to use this racial pretty often because of just how big Zuldazar is. So being a Zandalari, where most people are able to log off at, let's say, the Great Seal at the top of the pyramid, a lot of you guys will be walking through these doors right here towards this pedestal, and being a Zandalari, you have to spend a little bit less gold just to get yourself a free Goblin Glider. And it literally puts out a Pterodact. I think this is going to be one of the coolest racials, especially for leveling. It does have a hefty 15-minute cooldown, but it lets you get around the place a lot faster and easier. Next racial we got is going to be Regenerating. Regenerating have gone through a few iterations on what this racial should do. So right now it has a 2.5 minute cooldown and will regenerate 100% of your maximum health over 6 seconds, and it's interrupted by damage. So I feel like this is actually a very powerful racial. I think this will be exceptionally powerful for any tanks that do any PvE content, as well as healers and a variety of classes that do PvP. Being able to heal yourself for 100% is going to be, first of all, insane for duels. It is going to be insane for any healers who want to self-heal without having to spend the mana, as long as they're free off of all damage over time abilities. Then I feel like this could be a very strong racial. This also has some synergy, let's say, in Mythic Pluses. Let's say you're a Brewmaster, you drop down Ring of Peace to keep enemies in a dungeon away from you. And while your healer is locked out, or maybe your healer is focusing on healing the rest of the party, you could drop down Ring, run away from enemies, heal yourself over 6 seconds, and actually recover a lot of health. This type of micromanagement use of this racial can be exceptionally powerful in both raids as well as dungeons, and I feel like this could be great for almost any class, whether you PvP, mostly used for DPS and PvP, or PvE, where I feel like it's exceptionally powerful for healers for self-healing as well as tanks for self-healing. Then you also have a slight passive with City of Gold. I think this is the coolest racial for anybody who likes farming things. If you just love grouping up enemies in a dungeon and just blasting them, increase the gold earned from creatures by 2%. So every time you load a creature and it does drop you any kind of currency, gold, silver, whatever, you get 2% more of that currency. Lastly, your biggest racial is Embrace of the Loa. Every 5 days, you can go up to a shrine in Zuldazar and embrace one of the 6 Loa in the game. every one of these logo gives you a different passive that works as a combat passive. And this is why Zandalari are so sought after right now, and I think a lot of people are going to be making a swap on the Horde, because these passives are insane, no matter if you're a healer, tank, DPS, questing, PvP, PvE, whatever you do in the game. These racials, these passives are incredible, as they're very, very versatile. So the way this works is you walk up to a shrine, you can actually see what buffs they're going to give you. If you take Krogwa, this is the best tanking one. Taking damage has a chance to heal you and grant you armor. Then we have the Shrine of One Samdi. When you approach this one, make an offering of somebody who will grant you Embrace of One Samdi. Your abilities have a chance to deal shadow damage and heal you for 100% of the damage done. Then over here we have the Shrine of Paku. Your abilities have a chance to grant you 14 critical strike for 12 seconds. Then you have Gonk, which is a very interesting one. I don't think this will be widely used, but this one grants you 5% movement speed at all times. I think this could be an incredible racial whenever you're leveling your character, to be able to go from mob to mob, from quest to quest, a lot faster and easier. Then we have a Shrine of Akundan. This one is a healer racial. This one will grant your healing abilities to have a chance to heal the target for additional amount of healing. So whether you're a healer or even, let's say, protection paladin, wherever you use heals on yourself, you can increase your own self-healing. Or let's say you're even a feral druid in a duel, you can have a chance to heal yourself. And finally, we have the Shrine of Kim Bull. This one puts on a very interesting effect. I want to see if it changed any. Your damage and abilities have a chance to cause the target to bleed for additional damage over 6 seconds. This effect stacks up to 3 times, so this one is about the same. So you have different racials. You have a bleed racial, self-heal racial, or I guess a heal increase racial. Whenever you take damage, you have a chance to heal and grant armor. Shadow damage that will also heal you for 100% of the damage done. You have 5% movement speed, a racial to cause you 4% extra crit. So it's a variety of different passives that a lot of the other races in the game have, and this is Zandalari can change it up on the everyday notice every 5 days. So let's say you start this character, you go for movement speed. By the time you're max level, you're not stuck with movement speed. You can change up your playstyle towards more crit build, towards more bleed build, towards more shadow, towards more self-heal, whatever you want to do every 5 days. So this is what we're going to make him the most versatile race in the game, which is why I think a lot of people are actually going to swap to Zandalari. There's a high potential that all these passives could be incredibly powerful, and I cannot wait to find out just how strong these are once we are able to test them fully at max level on live servers. I think a lot of my guildies are going to be rerolling Zandalari, and I think for a good reason. Next we got is Kul Tirans, and Kul Tirans are very, very interesting as an allied race. They are the Alliance counterpart, and they can be a variety of classes just like Zandalari. These guys can be warriors, hunters, rogues, priests, shamans, so it's a human shaman, mages, monks, as well as druids. So humans, they can be druids as well as shamans, making them probably one of the most versatile human-like characters. The only class that cannot be are warlocks, because there's no warlock NPCs for the Kul Tirans, although I think a case could be made. And no paladins, even though you do see some paladin Kul Tirans during one of the faction assaults, but I guess Blizzard doesn't want to give too many classes away to everybody. See, these guys are pretty versatile in how many classes they have. The shamans, as you can see, they have interesting totems of their own, very much navy-like, looking like an anchor that sticks into the ground. Looks pretty awesome. And their druid forms are also very, very unique. So these guys are actually pretty versatile in terms of how they look, in terms of their appearances of different forms and such, in terms of cast animations, but the racials are also pretty interesting. Although I feel like these racials are just not quite as versatile as that of Zandalari, at least when it comes to dungeons and raids. But in PvP, they could be one of the strongest racials in the game. The Kul Tiran racials are as follows, and we'll cover the passives first and then talk about the main racials, the main entree of what they bring to the team. First of all, they have a very interesting tank-like racial called Brush It Off. Increases versatility by 1% flat, no matter what class you are. When you take damage, you heal for 2% of that amount over 4 seconds. This seems like a very unique tank racial, or maybe somewhat of a self-heal racial. It doesn't feel like it's an overpowered racial whatsoever. I think the amount of healing it'll do over time is going to be very small. When you think about the bigger picture in a raid or a dungeon, as the tank takes a beating from the boss, from the adds over time, this racial really does end up kind of paying for itself. I don't think this is going to be a great like emergency heal ratio. You're not going to be able to somehow use this ratio to take a lot of damage to just survive by yourself. But I think having some sort of self-heal of any kind could potentially work with maybe abilities like Leech, maybe a little bit like Versatility, but very, very, very unlikely. Next is going to be Child of the Sea. Hold your breath 50% longer and swim 10% faster. This is very similar to what Undeads have, where Undead actually just have unlimited amount of breath underwater, but swimming 10% faster is actually pretty huge. When you think about it, the slowest moments of World of Warcraft is when you're swimming around. Every time you're moving around on ground, whether you can mount, whether you're just walking, you're moving at maximum speed. But as soon as you go underwater, unless you're a druid who can shapeshift into aquatic form, it is the slowest experience ever. So for anybody questing or leveling, or in certain dungeons like Shrine of the Storm where you actually have to swim underwater to get to the boss faster, being a Kul Tiran and swimming 10% faster is absolutely nice. I think a lot of people will actually find this racial kind of useful. Nothing game breaking or game changing, but just the fact that you can swim faster and get around the environment easier, I think it has a benefit all on its own. Next, I have a couple different more passives. First of all, Jack of all trades. Skill in all professions increased by 5, so you start off with 5 in every single profession. That's just a baseline if you want to do multiple professions. Next, we have Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Reduces frost and nature damage taken by 1%. We haven't seen a lot of those passive racials in quite a while, so this kind of feels like just a staple thing they added to them. And finally, they have the main entree of the racial, which is the Haymaker. Wind up and unleash a might upon your foe, dealing 100 physical damage, stunning for 3 seconds, and knocking them back substantially. So this racial is a short cast of 1 second with a 6-yard range, so it's 1 extra than a 5-yard range, which is the melee range. So you have to get a melee to use this on an enemy. It does have 1 second cast time, but you will punch the enemy, stunning them, and knocking them back. And yes, when they do say substantially, you really do get kind of a knockback. So when you think about it, this is a thunderstorm or a typhoon as a racial on one target. So obviously if you're PvP, you're thinking of Lumbermill, you're thinking of Eye of the Storm. Let's say you're a warrior or a rogue, which is what these guys can be. Imagine stunning somebody who is about to pick up the flag on Eye of the Storm, cheap shot into a Haymaker to knock them off of the middle platform. I mean, that's a hilarious and an awesome racial. Being able to knock the enemy back is pretty awesome. And last time we tested this racial, this did not have a diminishing return with any of your stunts, which is why I think Kul Tiran might be the best racial when it comes to PvP in the future World of Warcraft, as long as they keep it no DR. They might have changed this by now, so it's a possibility that Blizzard might have changed that this does have a diminishing returns with other stunts. Actually, we can go find out. If I just go make a Kul Tiran rogue, we can find out if this still does have a DR or not. So here I am on a Kul Tiran rogue, and this is what the females look like. What we're going to do is we're going to stun the trained dummy. Every time we stun them, the diminishing returns apply, where eventually my stuns are simply just not going to be as effective. Let's say I go for another stun. Should it be 4 seconds? It isn't. It's only 2 seconds. So now we DR'd it by half. Now we're going to DR it down to a quarter, so it should be a quarter of that normal stun. So it should be a 1 second stun. Now it's fully stunned up. So when we use our Haymaker, we'll see if it even stuns the enemy at all. As we can see, it has a full 3 second stun, no diminishing returns at all, which I think could make this racial very powerful in PvP. This is kind of like a power creep with Kul Tirans right now and Pandaren. Right now, Pandaren are actually a viable option for PvP because of their incapacitated racial. It will remove all dots and it will put a gouge-like effect on an enemy just for 3 seconds. This racial is a hard stun that doesn't DR with anything, so you can chain a full-length stun into a half-length stun into a Kul Tiran stun multiple times over. So if you have an arena team with 3 Kul Tirans, that's... And I believe that does this racial even DR off of itself? I really hope so, because if it doesn't, imagine a 9 second Haymaker back to back to back, 9 seconds of stun from this racial. So Blizzard decided to balance this in a way to make it powerful. This is an exceptionally good ratio for anyone who wants to do PvP. Sacrificing 1 second cast to stun an enemy and knock him back has so much potential in player versus player combat viability. When it comes to dungeons and raids, however, this is where I don't think this ratio for Kul Tiran is going to be all that amazing. Having a self-heal over time, and even a slight one, like Brush It Off, is nice. Child of the Sea doesn't really play that much, and Rime of the Mariner and Jack of all trades don't play either, and Haymaker at max level doesn't seem to be doing some incredible amounts of damage. It might be an ability you would use, let's say, when you don't have any kind of energy cost. Like, let's say you're a warrior out of rage, you don't really have any abilities on cooldown, you might as well Haymaker. There's some enemies in the game that can't be stunned, some enemies that cannot be gouged, some enemies cannot be blinded or interrupted in regular means, but they can be typhooned, they can be hit with a Ring of Peace, they can be hit with a grip. So I wonder if Haymaker will work in a very similar way, where the stun effect won't happen, but the knockback effect still happens. So that could be maybe niche and unique for some Mythic Plus situations when you simply are out of interrupts. Or let's say you have certain affix where an enemy dies, they'll spawn a pool of sanguine under them and you can knock them out of it. Maybe, possible, I guess it is, but not 100% reliable or anything. Overall, it seems like Blizzard set themselves up to make a PvP race for the Alliance and a mostly PvE race with some PvP combinations for the Horde. I definitely think on versatility, the Horde has a better one. It's a lot of people that are going to be rerolling to a Zandalari. But for PvPers, I think it might be a possibility for a lot of you to go Kul Tiran. I think it's going to have a nice flavor with Horde versus Horde, and maybe some possibility with M+ dungeons. But on stats alone, I wish Kul Tiran's had a little bit more to make him more viable within raids. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's worth re-rolling to Zandalari or Kul Tiran in patch 8.1? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see all of you in the next one.